Boudreaux.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Alves. Here. Mayor Swift.
Here. And let's go ahead and jump right to the consent calendar. These items are continued routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or members of the public for special consideration, of which are there any?
I would like to pull 3 and 4.
Okay.
Now do I talk about it?
Well, let's go ahead and vote on the balance. In other words, let's vote on items number 1 and 2, and I do need a motion for those.
I would move one and two, staff recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to vote on items 1 and 2 of the consent calendar. We'll proceed to a vote in this case. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Items 1 and 2 pass, 5-0, and we'll move on to item number 3. Councilmember Crumick, I think you had some questions?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm just curious about item number 3, exactly what it is. I'm a little bit unclear, if somebody could clear that up.
It's, the, item number 3 deals with our emergency operations plan for the city. The last time it appears that it had been reviewed was back in 1988, when it was probably first, one of the last times it was reviewed. I've been trying to update it since 2016. In 2018, we were informed by County Emergency Operations that they had obtained a grant that would provide us up to $32,000 to assist us in getting that plan updated. During the next year, we were trying to locate somebody that would assist us with that, and 3 of the contractors that were provided, were not interested in the work, and we finally found one that has done Lathrop's, Stockton's, Manteca, and is currently doing Rippon's. And so she provided us a proposal that's within the grant and in the timeline, because we have to have it done by February of 2020 so that we can be reimbursed the grant money. They have to, the county has to bill the, I believe it's a federal grant, and has to do so before March 1st.
I see. So we got a grant for $32,000. We get the job done for within that, and then we get reimbursed.
Correct.
How much is the job actually?
$32,000.
Oh, so she bid what? Okay. And exactly what is an emergency operation plan?
Emergency operation plan covers what we would do in a case of almost any emergency within the city. Derailment, flooding. It actually, and it gives you what each agency has, or each member of the organization is responsible, what council's responsibility for is. If we lost where our main EOC would be, which is currently the PD, where would we relocate? It goes on and explains duties of logistics, finance, operations, support, everything that's laid out in the federal national emergency standards, NIMS and SIMS, which we have to be compliant with. In other words, to get any type of reimbursement from FEMA or any other, if our emergency operations plan is not compliant, then we can't submit for any
So it's kind
case
of
of a
an
disaster.
operations manual for like an act of God or something that we got to have
Well,
in place.
Yeah, I mean, you could have a derailment that could cause issues. You could have a
right.
plane crash, and please don't say that, because
Right.
I've seen that happen. Our
Okay.
flooding is very limited from what I recall when I was putting it together. It would take a collapse, I think, of New Maloney's, and if that happened, we would be underwater within 4 hours.
Really?
Yep,
Even up here?
yes.
I mean, you know,
New Maloney's, because of the way the flood plan is, that's about the only dam and the only
right.
really concerned flooding that we have currently.
So we take that 32 out of the general fund, and then when we get our thing submitted by February 2020, we get reimbursed the grant?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just checking. Thank you.
Are there any further questions on this one? Okay, if we would like to approve this appropriation, item number 3, I will need to have a motion in a second.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the additional appropriation for the budget for fiscal year 19 to 20 regarding the police professional services account. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Item number 4.
Yes, sorry, again, I just had some questions exactly what the Jordan Hollow Street Water Line Replacement Project is. I'm not too familiar with it, and I just wanted to know what we're spending the money on.
So this is a combination of a street project and a water service relocation. On Jordan Nolo, some of our service lines actually go through the middle of property front yards. So we will actually be relocating those service lines into the street area and repaving overlaying the existing pavement.
And all of that, was that already approved in the last budget, that project?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes,
I
it was
just,
part of the budget. Yeah.
just was curious. I appreciate it. Thank you. That's
Okay. Any further questions on item number 4? And again, I will need a motion and a second in order to pass it.
I'll move on staff's recommendation,
Okay.
item number 4.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number 4 of the consent calendar. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And it's my understanding that there's been a request to move an item up, and I will turn this over to Tammy right now.
Yes, so Mayor, we are asking if we could move item 6 before the staff communications.
Okay. Is there, do we have consensus? Is everybody in agreement? Is that okay? That's fine. Okay. Go for it.
Okay, so before you tonight is recommendation for the council to authorize the mayor and city manager to enter into a proposed memorandum of understanding with Escalon Parks Foundation for the skateboard park or make recommended changes to the agreement. In 2015, the process was started to establish a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with Escalon Parks Foundation, EPF, but was put on hold pending a confirmed designation for the location of the skateboard park through the master plan design process. In recent discussions regarding funding for the EPF, it was realized that the process was not completed. Therefore, at the meeting of September 16th, the council consensus was to bring the MOU back for approval. Staff updated the last version of the MOU with the correct dates, mayor name, and shared it with EPF, and did not receive any changes regarding the document. Legal counsel created the MOU based on the previous direction of the council and staff with the following guidelines. The location will be based on the master park plan for Hogan Innes Park, which was accepted on May 2nd of 2016. EPF shall be solely responsible for the construction of the skateboard park, including skateboard park design and layout of the specific area designated. EPF shall be solely responsible for obtaining any and all required permits and/or approval from the City Planning Commission, Recreation Commission, and Building Department. Both the City Council and EPF agree that any upgrades required as a result of the construction of the skateboard park will be performed at the time of the skateboard park and in sequence with the work. The city will bear cost of all improvements directly related to the construction of the skateboard park, including but not limited to existing utilities, landscaping, and ADA requirements as applicable. EPF shall not commence construction of the skateboard park until it has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the City Council that funding sufficient to complete this construction has been secured. Phasing of construction will not be permitted unless approved by the City Council. Prior to the commencement of construction, EPF shall provide progress reports, including financial statements, to the City Council at least twice annually. After commencement of construction, EPF shall submit monthly progress reports to the City Council. EPF shall commence construction no later than 8 years from the date of this MOU, unless the City Council grants an extension of time. EPF and the City Council agree that once construction is complete, all future maintenance, costs, security, supervision, and liability of any kind will be borne by the City of Escalon. The original MOU was presented to the City Council in 2015 and was actually different had different outlines than what is being presented tonight. At the time of the staff report, I wasn't sure when the changes had commenced, but I did, after it, find where in September of 2015, there was an email exchange with legal counsel, Councilmember Legero, and EPF about where we changed. It was previously EPF shall be solely responsible for constructing on and off-site improvements for the skateboard park, including but not limited to water, sewer, drainage, electrical, landscaping, parking, site accessibility, site security, lighting, and ADA required upgrades. And EPF shall commence construction no later than 5 years from the date of the MOU. So I did attach to the staff report what was the latest version with the changes, and then I attached what was presented to the council in September of 2015 for reference. So the council of 2015 didn't see the changes in the MOU because when it went, so it was originally proposed to the council on September 5th. We continued to September 21st, I believe, because a council member wasn't able to attend that meeting. And so when it came to September 21st, actually, I found that the email was between the 5th and the 21st about the changes, but it was presented to the council at the 21st exactly as it was on the 5th. So I hope that's clear as mud.
Well, I think in either case, I think what you've been able to do is give a couple options as to what the exact wording of this document would like to be. And it does seem that it does center around who's paying for what. And so, and I appreciate the fact that you've given both options there. And so regardless of which came first, who came first, it's 2019 now. So, and this is where we're at now. And I may want to remind the council that this is a motion, you know, if we do not approve the wording as it is, we do have the option to change the wording tonight. We do have the option to table the issue till later. In that case, I'd like to be able to appoint a couple council members to work on this wording if we're really far off. But this probably is something that we can't just let go, because sooner or later we do need it. We owe it to the Parks Foundation to have some kind of an MOU. So, any opening questions?
I just have a question. When did we decide that the city was going to cover all of the improvements?
So that is part of the part that it was technically not decided or approved by the council for that. So there were discussions that were going between legal counsel, staff, and EPF and council member, and that got changed in there, but it was never officially approved by the council, which is why it's pointed out in here that that was a change. So it's never technically been approved by council.
How can we lock ourselves into an MOU without knowing what the cost of those are? I mean, that's going out and bidding a project and saying, well, it's somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, but we don't know what it's going to be till it's done.
And that's correct. I mean, so when in September 2019, when we were discussing the funding, staff did put together some rough estimates for the sidewalks, the ADA parking, the landscaping, and it was estimated around $30,000. But what wasn't addressed was how to get the utilities there regarding electricity or water. So that part of it was kind of still open. Water I wasn't too concerned about because we have the park next door, although there would be some, labor involved. Electricity side of it, I was not sure on at all. I don't know. We didn't get into that depth of it, though.
That would include lighting and
Correct.
some type of monitoring.
Right,
And we don't know what that would be.
correct.
Okay.
I have some questions. So if we could scroll down to a couple more pages to 84, I think it's 2 more. It's easier to see. Under covenants, Is that 84? Yeah. So number one, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but it's EPF shall be solely responsible for the construction of the skate park. Okay, so that's that. And then if you go down to number 3, in the middle of that paragraph, it says, "The city will bear the costs of all improvements directly related to the construction of the skate park." Now, to me, those two sentences seem to contradict each other, and that's a problem I've got with it.
Okay, so if you continue reading that sentence, it's really referencing including but not limited to existing utilities, landscaping, ADA requirements.
Right. It,
So it's not, it's the improvements that are related to the skate park. So it's not the skate park, it's any improvements that would need to be done once the skate park is built, which would mean,
that's not how I read that. That's not how I understand that.
Sure.
The city will bear the cost construction of the skate park, including but not limited to. If it said included only to existing utility, but it says but not limited to. And so to me, that's where there seems to be, to me, it's just confusing language. And if this is, and then it takes me back to my next question where it says, where are we at? Okay, on page 82, legal counsel created the attached memorandum of understanding based on the previous direction of the council. Okay, what legal counsel is that?
that's, Anne.
So, can you respond to my comments about this being confusing language? Do you think that's not confusing?
Well, I know the intent was that EPF would construct the park itself, the actual park. And that the city would pay for the landscaping around it and other, ADA access
Right.
to it. Not, so in other words, yeah, as Tammy has said, they're the related improvements, not the park itself.
So, I still think it sounds confusing. I think there's probably a better way to word that, in my opinion. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but, so that, to me, and obviously, it's been a lot of, discussion about this, and I'm trying to get this hammered out in front of everybody so everybody's on the same page. So the original MOU was never signed, correct?
Correct.
2015.
It was never approved
So there is
by the
no
council.
memorialized memorandum of understanding currently.
No.
So this is picking up where we left off. The language has been changed so that now the city will bear the cost of certain items related to construction of this place. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Well, we're not wedded to
Well,
that.
it
We're not
actually
wedded to
said that in the.
What does that mean?
Sorry.
didn't.
Well, look at paragraph 2.
We can go back to what it said
Shall be,
before.
oh,
But
you're
EPF
right.
shall be solely responsible,
Different
yeah.
stuff. We can go back to
We can,
EPD.
do we need a change?
Yeah.
Like, that'll be another meeting.
I don't remember.
No,
can do
no,
that now.
we could do that tonight.
Memorialize the original.
We could do that tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
th-
there-
yeah,
go ahead.
this-
Sorry, Ann.
So the changed version has not been looked at by the full council.
Correct.
It was just some draft language that one council member suggested. It just proposed. So it's all open to discussion.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have a question. When initially speaking about this project, the price was bannered around of about $500,000. What is that cost covering? If that doesn't cover the lights, the sidewalk, and everything included, where's the $500,000 going?
So, the Parks Foundation had an estimate of 412,000,
Okay.
770, and then there was an increased cost that was being estimated for prevailing wage. That's when the city was considering covering those costs, which increased it by about 75,000 and made it 490,000. At our September 2019 meeting, staff did add in the additional 30,000 for some of those improvements, which took it to the 520,000.
What are some of those improvements we're referring to?
The sidewalk and ADA parking, plants, ground cover, and irrigation around the park, the skate park, sorry.
That's my question.
Yeah, and Tammy, let me ask you a question. For those improvements, and by the way, let me backtrack a little bit. I don't think this is a set in stone document. I think this was presented by the staff as something, okay, here you go. You have 2 or 3 different options. how would you like to handle this, council? Okay, so this is what we're doing right now. We're kind of start crafting and choosing our preferences to how we'd like to move forward with this MOU. But I will ask one question regarding the option that if the city were liable for some of for the sidewalks, like stuff like that, where would be a likely source for those monies to come from?
It would be your Parks and Recreation Developer Impact
I
Fees.
have another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and the reason I'm saying that, because that's what I was kind of sort of thinking too. And again, I'll just take us back to the first meeting in this September with this council, where we received a pretty clear consensus from the public. Not that they don't want a skate park or anything like that, or that's a bad idea, but they don't want to see the city monies being used for it at this time. And so that's why I would really be leaning in favor towards going back to, and striking the language that says that the city will bear the cost of all improvements directly related to the construction of the skateboard park, including but not limited to existing utilities, landscaping, ADA requirements as applicable. I'd prefer to strike that personally to the language that it was in the original draft MOU, where it says the EPF shall be solely responsible for constructing on and off-site improvements for the skateboard park, including but not limited to water, sewer, drainage, electrical, landscaping, parking, site accessibility, site security, lighting, ADA required upgrades. And I say this in the spirit of what the council decided, what the input that we received from that public hearing in September. Another reason why I would advocate it as a standalone project for the EPF at this time versus us diving into it. Back in 2015, we were working on a plan to build a new park, phase and plan. And so I think it was probably generally considered as part of phase one. Okay, you're doing all the construction, you're doing all the parking lots, and by the way, we're also going to be doing the skate park, okay? That was before we figured out how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to do this? And I think that what we know now is that we're probably not going to be able to pay for phase one, the city, okay? So if the Parks Foundation is in a situation where they can find the funding, they get the funding, they get their state park, it's much more likely at this time, and frankly for the foreseeable future, in my opinion, for it to be a standalone project. And therefore, they would also handle all the lighting, utilities, all that good stuff. Again, because the public has told us, maybe not use city money at this one at this time, especially if it comes out of that Parks Fund. So.
I have a question on, I believe it would be page 83. It says, the original MOU that was presented to the city council in 2015 was different than the attached, and staff is unsure when the changes were made, but believe it was done between legal counsel, Councilman Legero, and the EPF. The following items were changed in the current agreement. So I'm a little confused as to the staff is unsure when the changes were made, but believe
So-
it was done between legal counsel.
Yeah, so as noted, after the development of the staff report, I was able to locate in 2015 an email exchange with Councilman Legero, staff, and legal counsel regarding these changes.
That wasn't Ann?
Yes.
Oh, do you remember? Are you sure about it? Vaguely? Okay.
It was just by email that,
Yes.
and you
Well,
had,
email is what I found. I don't know if there was verbal or not.
I'm just trying to get a time frame. So these new
But those
provisions-
changes were initiated in 2015, and.
that the city would bear certain costs.
Yes, but they were never presented to the council.
Oh, so it was just a,
so really, it shouldn't even have
I
really.
shouldn't have grabbed this version, honestly,
which version?
the-
The one with the changes.
with the one with the changes.
So we should only be talking about the original. That's what you're saying,
Yes.
which doesn't include the city picking up the tab for those
Exactly.
things.
Yeah, maybe, do you want to?
Sure.
What happened?
What happened was the Park Foundation was trying to get some firm numbers put together. And the city, my recollection is this had to do with requiring the Parks Foundation, if they built the park out at Hogan Ennis Park at the community center, that they were going to be required to have to upgrade the bathrooms out there, all sorts of different things that didn't seem like there was much of a nexus to the skate park itself. So the skate park, or the park foundation was questioning, why would they have to rebuild the bathrooms and those types of things just to put the skate park in there? So there was a lot of discussion going back and forth about what they would be responsible for or what they wouldn't be responsible for, and that was kind of the extent of it, and then it kind of died out. I don't think the MOU is particularly helpful at this time until there's some more firm information as to what the skate park is gonna do, what the needs are out at the community center. So, I mean, I kind of agree with Councilmember Merkin that it's kind of premature at this point. I mean, there are certain things that you could probably, settle on as to location and that, but I don't know about the remainder of it.
Okay, so, can I make a comment? So you're saying that we should be looking at the original one, not the updated one? We're looking at the wrong one?
Right.
Okay.
Which is, so if you go forward, the original one is in here.
Okay, so, but if we were to go forward with what's on the agenda, it would be going forward with the updated one?
No, it could be either one.
You guys
Well,
can
but-
make that, you can make that note in the
Okay.
motion to,
I think that it would be, I mean, I'd like to hear from everybody in the audience, but to me, it seems like I would be fine with moving forward with the original one, which says that the skate park foundation would take care of every aspect of the development.
You know, one thing I might suggest to address the concern that had come up from EPF before is under item 2, where it says EPF will be responsible for the on and off-site improvements. I could insert the words directly related to the skateboard park.
And let me clarify my statement, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm not in favor of the skate park or not. I'm actually, I could literally go either way with it. I called the city of Riverbank today. They have a skate park. I called the city of Oakdale. I spoke to 2 different people within their city hall administration. And I asked them both, is it a good thing, is it bad, positive, negative? They both said the same thing. They said, this Riverbank said it's 85% positive. There's a little bit of bad, but there's not a lot of tagging, there's not a lot of crime, the kids use it. The Oakdale, they haven't had a huge amount of backlash where people are coming in going, oh, we have a skate park now. Didn't happen. And the Oakdale one said they put in a couple basketball hoops, and it's very, those get used a lot. So I'm in favor, actually, I'd be okay with this. To me, the reason I'm in favor of the original one is I don't like the open-endedness. We don't know what those improvements that the city would pick up for. They could be 30,000, which we could do. They could be 300,000, which we can't do. So I just don't think we can leave that open-ended like that. That's my opinion on this.
So moving forward, we've already heard a variety of, thoughts about this. The reason I think that we probably should be doing something in terms of addressing the costs is so that we have something going down the road, as well as the EPF has something going down the road. And if it sounds like there's a feeling out there to revert back to the original document, which basically said that the EPF would be handling, the construction on off-site improvements, and all that stuff, all that, then I might suggest you put that language in, or just stick with the original and then take out the language that said that the city is responsible for those costs. Would that be?
The original one says that
one doesn't.
EPF is responsible.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So in other words, just like Councilmember Crumick said, we go back to the original document. Does the council feel comfortable in making that call tonight, or would they prefer to have, maybe see that wording in the actual memorandum before we decide to make a call on this? And then it can be brought back to council.
I'd be comfortable making the call tonight with the.
so what I would recommend the motion would be that the covenants from the original agreement would be,
From 2015.
from 2015 would be the
What were-
covenants that would follow in the understanding.
Would be memorialized.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the council, do I have consensus to at least continue on that one, and then maybe we can make a vote on that tonight, or would we rather go ahead and take her back? And by the way, yeah, I'd like to have a little bit of input from the audience too. I did see a hand raised. Kirk? Sorry about that, Angelo. Next.
Me too, Angela. I should have let you come up here first. Kurt Danziger, 389 Noni. Try to get this out of the way so it doesn't spike the mic. I'm pleased to hear you make the decisions. It sounds like that you're going to make. So I won't go into that. I will go into process. After the September meeting, public hearing, and it was clear that although people weren't one way or the other really on the park, they didn't want to see the city monies spent on that. And so why this came up again, I don't know. Why, when Tammy says she was requested to bring back the MOU, she was requested to bring back the original MOU, change the dates, the mayor, and then put it forward to you. I think that's the only thing you need to address. If there's a problem with off-site being bathrooms, I think that's a good idea to call that out. That's something that's the park, probably not the skate park. But the original idea was the Escalon Parks Foundation was going to design it, fund it, and then the city would run it. And there really isn't any discussion unless you want to have a town hall meeting or a budget meeting next year where you're going to actually set aside city funds for construction. This coming in and doing this vote here tonight is really kind of disingenuous after the September meeting. So I think that procedurally, we ought to look at this, if the city's going to get involved at all, ever, as a budget item. Just like you look at everything else, it'd be part of that. I don't know why emails count as much as presentations to you all. I mean, what's that? You can send an email to each other there and all of a sudden you're going to vote on it. That just seemed spurless to me. I don't know why that came about like that. And I think you addressed the other items that Tammy had written down there. So I concur with the direction it looks like where you're going. I don't know that we should bring it up again unless it's at a budget meeting, or you want to have a town hall and say, hey, the city's looking at putting $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into this project here. How do y'all feel about it? If you need to hear it again. All right.
I just want to make a couple of clarifications. This was staff that brought back the wrong MOU that hadn't been presented to the council. So this was not action of any particular individual besides staff. When I went back in my files, I looked at the latest date, not realizing that had not been in front of the council at the time until, unfortunately, I had shared it with the EPF and got their feedback on it. So that's why
On the agenda item tonight or Exhibit
Yes.
B?
Yes.
All right,
So,
well-
so that was my mistake. That wasn't initiated by anybody else. That was my error when I looked back in the files. And then in regards to the email statement, at the time, we were communicating by email between a council member, legal counsel, council members, legal counsel, and the EPF. So it was a constant communication between there. That was when we were working through it initially. So that's why the email was brought up.
Well, if that were the case, and I'll take you on your face value, somebody changed without your authorization number 4, the bullet number 4 on the agenda item.
It's,
That's the crux here. That got changed.
so, again, it got changed because of communications that were being done, but because the item got tabled and never got brought back to the council, it was never officially introduced to the council. But we did have that document started with those changes back in 2015.
If everybody here wasn't here tonight and they voted on this, would it pass and be a binding MOU on the city?
Yes.
Yeah. That was a dangerous situation. Cut it any way you want. I'm not going to say anything else about it there. You had an MOU back in 2015, and there was a reason for that verbiage and why it was. This got changed, and oops, it's a mistake. Oops, that could have been a real costly mistake. and not just affecting the park funds, but affecting the general fund. I think if anybody's ever thinking about going after the general fund, they need to go and have a public hearing and have it at the budget time of year. This is not the way to do this. So that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, Kirk, thank you. I think, Angela, you had a couple points you'd like to make?
Pretty well. Angelo Blanco, 1604 Fifth Street. Pretty well, Merkin said, you know, it's an open check. When they worked on our sewer pump out there on the water line, you didn't say, get it and just send us a bill. You knew how much it was gonna cost, or 99% how much it was gonna cost. Today, the another thing I liked in that deal over there, they said it had to be completed in 8 years. You never put a time on anything. You had a time on that for 8 years, that skate park had to be committed if you guys would vote yes on it. You can't tell me a project that you ever put it, like the old City Hall, you got a timeline on that to get it done? And you got one on this, so I don't know what's going on. And the 15th, I don't ever remember when the city took over that park. You showed me the paperwork. Bring it up here and read it to the audience, that when that was changed and who voted for it. Who was on the council and who voted to turn it over to the city was in charge of the skate park. Because I know Mike and those guys, I was always told, no, we're gonna get the money, we're gonna do it, all the way that you want the land. I have never heard him ever say, that you guys had a vote, that you were gonna take it over. Now, tonight you wanna take it over, you need to vote on that. But I think you guys should think about, like an open meeting on it. That, and then we say 500,000 was mentioned, we don't know how much it's gonna cost. You ought to be able to figure it out at, at least 90% of it. That's about all I wanna say, but I think we should have a discussion for the whole, put it on the agenda, we're gonna talk about it, and what it's gonna cost, everybody will know what the whole project, or 90% of what it's gonna cost. That's about it.
Appreciate it. And actually, to Angela's point regarding the time frame is basically there to say, we will hold, that ground for the skate park for X amount of years.
Yeah,
And
so
when
the
it's-
agreement is good, and they're supposed to commence unless the council gives an extension. If it goes beyond those 8 years, then basically the MOU would be up for renegotiation.
Okay. And then to the Kirk's point, that's very well taken, I want to reiterate again, that original MOU does not have the city with any financial commitment. Because again, it was made pretty darn clear just about a month and a half ago where the public was at on this one. And that is, they don't want to have us using our dollars on this project. So, what I want to make sure is that it's perfectly clear with that original MOU. And that's why I'm almost leaning, guys, gentlemen, if you're not completely comfortable with the language, then I say we take it back and have them take a look at it. I think Councilmember Crum made a very good point on item number 3 as well. Yeah, you can kind of sort of see that thing both ways. And I would feel an awful lot more comfortable being able to vote on a clean MOU that at this point does not have the city committed to a blank check.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I would agree with you that we need some of this language clarified in number 3. To me, that's confusing, maybe to nobody else, but to me it is. I'd like that cleaned up a little bit. And then also, as far as the time frame, being 8 years, this was in 15, so this is 4 years ago. So the 8 years would, if this was adopted then, we'd be 4 years into it already. And I don't really know if, I like to be, locked into things too long. So I think I would probably change that to 5 years, and from this point on. And if something can happen.
That's what it was in the original.
Huh?
That's
Yeah,
what it was in
that's what it was
the original,
original.
5 years.
Well, it says 8.
Yeah.
Or wait, the original 5, yeah.
If you look at the exhibit B.
Right. I like that. I like the 5-year. And I like that we could get the language cleared up and get a clean look at it.
I have a question.
Yeah. Jeff? Councilmember Legero, sorry about that.
So, at the beginning of this, it says, now therefore the parties agree as follows. Who are the parties to this?
The city and the EPF.
Where's the EPF? Where are they? Are they here? Are they here to talk about this and give input?
They were told that it was gonna be on this meeting,
So,
and it was shared with them, but yeah,
so when it was first proposed back in 15, the original language, they were unhappy with the language and they attempted to negotiate some of the language that caused them problems, right? Like, they're gonna be responsible to redo the bathrooms out there. So it seems to me that this needs to be hammered out with the Parks Foundation to come up with language that is acceptable to both parties, because it's an agreement between the parties. So here we're negotiating at the dais here and going back over prior negotiations with the Park Foundation, yet they're not here to discuss that. So it doesn't seem like this is something that needs to be done here. This should be hammered out with the Parks Foundation, and then when the language is agreeable to that party and to this party, then it should be presented as an MOU to enter into. Just seems like it's premature. It's, we're saying all these things without the input of the other party to the agreement.
But they were told that this is the meeting, we're gonna talk about this tonight.
correct.
Yeah.
Who was told?
The EPF,
Parks Foundation.
the Parks Foundation,
How many, is
All
that
board
Mike?
members.
All of them? They were all told?
yes.
And
Nobody's here?
Gracie's here.
That's true. You weren't told?
It was via an email. This was shared with all of the recent contacts that I had for the membership.
Make a valid point.
Yeah.
If we want this done right, let's do it right.
And the problem is, it's an agreement, and I disagree with Mayor Swift's characterization about the input from the community. There were people here that were for the skate park and people that were against it. I think it's a matter of hammering out how that relationship is gonna work. Conditions have certainly changed since 2015. If the community does not want rec funds to be used for the skate park, so be it. But when we're talking about this MOU, this is something that needs to be negotiated and hammered out with the Parks Foundation, like was begun several years ago and just never completed. So, to me, that makes more sense to get everybody on the same page. They understand what their obligations are, city understands what their obligations are, and yet it can still change. I mean, you know, we could have funding available through the city and decide that money is perfect to go to the skate park, and that's the project that it gets dedicated to. But this is just us trying to revisit something that's 4 years old. The negotiations began and were headed in a particular direction to try and address the sharing of the costs and who was gonna be responsible for what, and then those negotiations ended without any kind of agreement, so.
I'm gonna propose something, but I'd like to have, Gary, you want to say something first?
Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. I'm not so sure, Jeff, why are we negotiating with them? They said they wanted to do it. We said, go ahead, you pay for everything, we'll do it. And originally, that was the concept. Then the council moved to set aside an area in the Hogan Ennis Park. Still wasn't working out, so the recreation fireworks booth was handed over to the Parks Foundation. That still didn't raise enough money, and this is looking like we're gonna negotiate who's gonna pay for what, when the original concept was, you get the money, you get everything done, bring it to us, you build it, we'll take it over. And it seems like we keep slowly drifting toward, we're gonna pay for it all. And to be honest, the wording in this new memorandum, in my opinion, that's what it says. And I know the wording's a little different, but I think the best idea would be go to the original MOU, and it says, okay, you guys pay for everything. Now, if at a later time, you want to go specifics, like, as you said, the ADA bathrooms, do that as a separate issue. And deal, there may be some other issues. but the original concept is still, they provide everything. So that original MOU was like that. And my memory isn't all that good, but I do not recall anything about this additional language. And I believe you said it never came to the council.
No.
And it did not come to the councilmen either that weren't directly involved. So this was sort of a surprise to hear this evening, so. My opinion, thank you.
No, thank you, Gary. The original MOU, I just want to clarify, that was voted on by that council. So that is the going, right?
It was never voted on.
And that's where we're at now, because nothing was ever
Correct.
really solidified. Okay. That's too bad, that's too bad. So, would it be advantageous at this point, again, council members, to make sure we all are seeing that original MOU in front of us before we make a vote? I would actually prefer that,
What is it we're doing now?
going back to the original MOU.
Well, I think,
I thought we were gonna change it. Wasn't that?
That would be going back to the original.
Okay.
Right.
And Jeff suggested maybe all the parties interested or involved should be there to negotiate it.
But if we have an original MOU and if they were negotiated on it at that time, do we see a need to be renegotiating? Because, I mean, at least from my perspective, in terms of the city's financial responsibility, I prefer that original MOU where it's not our responsibility.
Well, the original MOU was provided to the foundation, and they're not here, so I don't know, I mean,
Did they originally agree to that?
no, because,
No, we didn't vote on it.
because there, no, it never came back to the council.
The
you wanna say
EPF, did
something?
they accept it? Were they happy with it?
And answer that.
I don't know that I can answer that either.
I'm gonna be suggesting that maybe at this point, we postpone this issue definitely until the next meeting to get that original MOU there and visible. And if we wanna have an effort to have the Parks Foundation there, tell them, guys, either you're coming or you're not. Do you feel comfortable with that?
I think Danny had something to
Yeah.
add.
Yeah, Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you very much twice for putting this first, because I thought I was going to talk first, because I do have to get to Sacramento and catch a red eye to Florida. But thank you very much for the dialogue. My concern was, and the questions were answered, the section in the background and information where things got changed and staff, or Tammy didn't know when that got changed, so that was a nice clarification on the dates. Yeah, I think you should just table this, because you're gonna have to start all over with an MOU, because I've been looking at that thing for 2 days now. And from 19, I know that one wipes out the other one, but if you're gonna go to one, to the other, and back and forth, you gotta figure out somewhere to start anew. You got the information here, I guess you take the right information out and go back to the original, which was in June of 2015?
And it's, yeah, sometime like that,
September.
yeah.
Well, that wasn't the original one. The original MOU that was written was in June of 2015.
It
Then in
was,
September of 2015 was the second MOU, no? But anyway, the bottom line is, Councilman Merkin brought up the point, as it read today, and if you had voted on it, it would have been like an open, a checkbook, just sign the check book, and then when things come about, the city paid.
Yeah. Well, that's fine, Rick. I think at this
Yeah.
point, we probably ought to be at least postponing this indefinitely, at least until the next meeting where we can physically see that original MOU, know exactly what we're voting on, agree on the language.
Well, you
that we're
keep
voting
saying, you keep saying the original. If you want to go back to the last one, which is September of 2015, but when you say the original one, there was one that was written, not voted on, in
Right.
June of 2015.
Let me clarify, the one that the city is not responsible for paying for sidewalks,
Okay.
lighting. Basically, the very things that they told us they don't want, the majority told us they didn't want to vote for back in September.
Got it, yeah.
Or didn't want to pay for it back in September.
Yeah, well, very good. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for putting it on.
Good fight.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, since we're at
So-
ground zero again,
So on that suggestion, yeah, is there a,
Since we're at
motion.
ground zero again, I think it makes sense that we do this with both groups involved, go through it again and get it done so it's accurate. Then when it comes to us, it's done, both parties are happy, we sign off on it.
How do we do that?
Well,
Well, you're gonna have to have.
here, no, here's how we do it. What I could do, what I would suggest is we move to postpone it definitely until the next meeting, or until 2 meetings from now, if we want to give the EPF a month to meet up. Postpone it definitely, okay, for 2 meetings from now. In the meantime, you'll be meeting with the EPF. I'd like to be able to appoint 2 council members on the council member side to go through this, and I'd like to be one of them. Would somebody else like to be the other one? Not everybody wants.
I'll do it.
Okay. Don't be too enthusiastic. No. No. And anyway, so that's what I would propose. If we're interested in doing that as a motion, so we move forward, that would be fantastic. Well, I'm not gonna make it.
I would move that we postpone this item until the,
Meeting in the future.
It would be November 18th if you want to go to.
yeah, let's do that. Let's not have just open-ended.
Okay.
Let's
So,
give these guys, yeah. let's give some
November,
time.
what?
18th.
18th, and that within that time, Mayor Swift and myself meet with the Escalon Parks Foundation to hammer out the exact memorandum of understanding.
I would second it.
Motion's been moved and second to postpone the matter definitely. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table?
I think it's the way to do it. I think you guys are taking the right approach.
Okay.
Not taking sides on either side, but I think it's just clean up this mess and get it right so everybody gets on the same page and we agree on what we agree on. We don't agree, but let's get it done
Well,
right.
I mean, I hate to put it like this, but it's been 4 years. What's one more month?
That's exactly.
As long as we're heading in some direction, we're actually deciding something. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the motion postponed definitely, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And now we'll be going back to staff communications. Tammy?
Mayor and council, before you tonight are monthly reports with the treasurer's report, the police department, animal control, water department, development services, building report, public works, wastewater treatment plant, recreation department, and the citizen advisory committee quarterly report. Staff is available to answer any questions that you might have on those.
Any opening questions?
I had a question for Public Works, but I'll save it till I see one of them.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other items from any member of the staff?
I do have a couple more items. I just want to note that we have set a water rate study workshop for October 28th at 6:30 here in the council chambers. Our current 5-year rate study has been exhausted, and part of the requirement for the funding with the new well from the state was that we have the study that confirms that we can cover those debt service payments. The report will be available on the website tomorrow. Notices will be in the paper on Wednesday. We'll post it on Facebook tomorrow or Wednesday with a link to the report. The report will be on the November 4th meeting for the council to accept it. Then notices will be mailed to all the residents by November 18th. Begin the 45-day comment period, and the final public hearing will be on January 6th of 2020, and then the proposed rates would be effective March 1st of 2020.
I have a question really
Sure.
quick on what you just said. It was a lot. So you said that in part of the conditions for the well that we just did, which was 1.2 million, something like that?
We haven't did the well itself yet.
But did we vote on that project, right? Wasn't that?
Yes, it's in the budget, and part of the funding is being acquired from the Department of Water Resources. And for the loan, they want to confirm that you have the funding.
And the way we do that is a water rate study.
Yeah, so basically, the consultant evaluates the rates make sure that there's sufficient funding in the rates to cover that loan payment.
They can't just take a look at our balance sheet or our books and determine if we have enough money?
No.
They have to look at, because don't we know how much money's coming in from our water?
We do. But the study actually looks at a 5-year picture ahead.
Like if we're gonna raise rates and how much
Correct.
extra money that's gonna make?
Yes, and future capital projects.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So, I have a couple more items.
ahead, go for it.
Staff did meet with, Pace Consulting last week regarding the wastewater treatment plant. We have a draft report, but we're waiting for some final analytical results from the industrial season for them to incorporate them into that and finalize it. The report is quite detailed, so I wanted to consult with the council to see if you guys would like to hold a workshop on that. We could either potentially do it before a council meeting, or we could do it the week of November. I talked to the consultant, he's available November 13th through the 15th.
Is that Andy?
Correct, yeah. But I was trying to get feedback on it. It's a detailed report, and I felt like it might be beneficial to do the workshop.
In the workshop, is he gonna talk about costs?
Of course, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, what's your preference on that?
I like a workshop, and is that something advertised and people can come in and
Absolutely, right.
find out about and we do all the advertising that we have? Okay.
And you're talking about the week of November 12th?
Yeah, he's not available on the 12th, but he was available the 13th or 14th, which is the Wednesday, Thursday.
Right.
Or the next week, he wasn't sure. He had one other date that he made, another meeting that he was trying to nail down. So, if the next week, the 18th, the week of the 18th, which the 18th is our regular meeting, so, we could either potentially do an early workshop, or we could do it another day that week, whichever. Tuesday is planning commission meeting, the 19th, so we wouldn't want to do it that night.
Would he like, if we did the workshop on the 13th or 14th, would he come back at that council meeting and like tell us again and go over that and be kind of another one?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to do a workshop where we put something in the water bill and use the sign and let people know to come out on that week. And then if we could get him in here on the 18th, I think that would be great.
I don't know that we'll be able to get it in the water bill because of timing wise.
Okay.
Because that newsletter's already done and uploaded for the utility bills for November 1st.
I just say use as many outlets as
But
we
we
have
will still,
available.
I mean, we'll still use the other avenues, just wanted to make that note.
Okay.
Can we use electronic sound and sign
Sure.
out there?
So,
What time we're looking at during the day?
Well, that's up to the council's availability.
so to have a standalone meeting, if we're looking at, like the 13th, is that what we're,
Wednesday the 13th?
Yeah,
and,
or Thursday, the 14th, whichever, or you could go into the next week.
okay, either. I think probably the big thing is to capture the greatest amount of people here that I can be able to make it to the meeting, so,
I say Wednesday.
yeah, I've got a feeling Wednesday might be more advantageous than Thursday.
Okay.
And I don't know if
Do you want to do a 6 PM? Do you want to do
Wednesday the 13th?
Wednesday, the 13th?
Let me ask you guys are gonna be the likely ones to come here, and hopefully you'll bring a lot of your friends. 6 o'clock, 6:30? Okay?
Is it gonna be on YouTube?
I would imagine.
Yeah.
I'd love it to be on YouTube. 6 PM then, okay? That gives us the time to ask whatever questions we need to ask. We're not rushed. So Wednesday, 6 PM,
That's sewer or water?
both.
No, that's sewer.
Oh, that's just sewer.
The 13th is a sewer, the 28th of October is water
What time's that meeting at 28th?
at 6:30 PM.
Okay. Okay. 6 PM. Advertise.
Employee appreciation is, dinner has been set for November 1st at the community center, starting at 6. Just reminding council.
You say costumes?
Costumes, please.
Oh, boy. No?
Not me.
No?
Got a costume.
Okay.
And then this year, we will be closing City Hall for the week of December 23rd through the 27th. 2 of those days are scheduled holidays. We're just closing a couple extra days.
But it will be open at the very end of the year with like
Correct.
30th and 31st or something like
Yes.
that, whatever that Monday and Tuesday,
Yes.
yeah, okay, okay.
That is all I have.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
I do too.
One, I will be out of town from the 24th until the 1st.
Can't hear you.
I will be out of town from the 24th through the 1st on a pre-planned vacation that my wife wanted 6 months ago. In November, we will be doing No Shave November in response to prostate cancer support. And I've also encouraged them that if the personnel want to continue that into December, then I'm encouraging them to make sure they take part in Toys for Tots and help donate and take part in that. And I'll allow them another month, them leaving their beards grow, so.
There you go.
So if you start seeing some furry officers, it's in regards to that. And you probably have seen it, but just in case, I think you've heard PG&E's going some power shut-offs. Per OES, county OES, San Joaquin County is not affected in any way. Shut-offs. There's nothing.
Good, good.
And that's it for me.
They should be.
I had a few items
Yes.
as well. Our planning commission met last week, and we took public comment on the updates to our current housing element. Updates or public comment only, so next month, which we scheduled for the 20th, which is a week later than our usual meeting date, we should be receiving comments from HCD on what other changes or how our draft looks to them. If they have any additional changes they'll want made to our housing element, and we will be reviewing that at planning commission level in November, and it will be coming to the city council for review and approval in December, and then does need to be submitted to the state by December 31st. We'll also have some updates to the general plan that will be coming either in December or January that do not have a due date like the housing element that we will be completing as well. We will also be bringing forward in the month of November the 2019 updates to the California Building Code, which will become effective January 1st, 2020. And then as well, we did speak to Planning Commission about whether or not they would be interested in making some changes to Title 17, which is our zoning. We have been having a couple inquiries over the last few months from citizens interested in either some type of small-scale winery, a brewery, a small-scale wine-making or beverage production in the C2 area. Currently, that's not allowed in C2. We were wondering, and we asked Planning Commission, and we did get their consensus on moving forward with that with specific requirements that would obviously only allow it in certain areas in the C2 where it would be reasonable and they would be able to do it. If there's areas backing up to residential or something like that, but at least be able to apply for a use permit and make their case as to how they could go about mitigating any factors. Staff would still need to do some research on how to word it, small scale, and look at some other cities' codes and see what they have pertaining to how to not have some mass production move in, something that would fit in with that surrounding area. So if we had council's consensus on that, we would put that on our list of to-dos for getting that code updated to allow for some
So let me get,
areas.
so somebody wants to start a little brewery, microbrewery or micro winery in the C2, and
It's currently
it's
prohibited.
currently prohibited, so we would need to approve
And those are
that.
the areas that everybody are interested in, so our C2 is all along
Where do
McHenry
you do
Avenue.
that kind of business?
Currently, it's in our M1 and M2, so it would be our light and heavy industrial areas is where it's allowed. And for mass productions, larger places like Heinz and Kraft and those type of
Right.
places, that's suitable.
Yeah.
We're getting more of an interest from people who kind of make their own stuff and then want to be able to sell it, or want to have a little wine tasting room where people could come and try it out. And so we'd like to be able to try to promote that, and right now, it's a flat no.
I
So,
can't believe we don't have that already.
Yeah.
I mean,
We've
most
talked
towns.
about it a lot.
I can give you examples of little breweries, little wineries that, yeah.
Yeah.
They're all in those C2 areas.
So that'll go to
Yes.
planning commission only, or do we have to?
It would go to both, and they've agreed to bring that forward. So it would go to planning commission first for review and
a
comments.
zoning change.
And then we would bring it to council for recommendation.
Pretty good.
Sweet.
Fantastic.
Sounds
yeah.
good?
The
Okay.
consensus, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Anything else?
No?
Okay. I know, Ann, you have something.
Yes. I wanted to clarify the way I described the procedure to adopt a general sales tax before. I want to make two clarifications on that. I looked at the research again and talked to some other attorneys who have helped cities do this. And I think I had said that the general tax would require a noticed public hearing. It does not. There's a voter-approved tax called a parcel tax, and that requires a public hearing, but a sales tax does not. So we don't need it. We don't need a public hearing. And the second clarification is that in a couple of cities that I've represented in the past, I always had the city council introduce the sales tax ordinance at one meeting and then adopt the ordinance at the next meeting, at the same meeting that it adopts the resolutions to put it on the ballot. And the ordinance would say that it goes into effect only if the voters approve it. But as it turns out, I mean, you can do it that way, but it's not required. The city council does not have to go through and introduce and adopt the ordinance in 2 meetings. Because really, because the way it works is the voters approve it. You know, the law says that, you know, all the city council can do is place it on the ballot. And the law specifically says that the tax ordinance would go into effect actually 10 days after the city council announces the results of the vote. So that's the way it works. So actually, this makes it much simpler so that there's not as much pressure now on the timing. So I know the city is going to have this mailer go out November 1st. So on November 18th, you will be able to review that and discuss and give direction whether you want to place it on the ballot. And then between that date, and if you do decide and give that direction, then between then and December 2nd, we can, work out what the exact language of it is going to be. And then on December 2nd at your meeting, then the city council would only need to adopt 3 resolutions. And one of the resolutions would have the proposed ordinance attached to it. And it would be to place that ordinance on the ballot. So.
What's the vote needed to pass a sales tax measure? 51 or is it 66 or what is it?
It's 51 for a general tax and it's 2/3 for a special tax.
Well, what are we looking at?
My recommendation is as a general tax. Because
Why?
a 2/3 vote is just really difficult.
A general tax because it's easier to pass?
Right.
But how
What's the
could-
difference between a general tax and a special tax?
The special tax is legally can only be used for a specific purpose.
So then the money goes in the general fund.
Yeah, well, the money goes in the general fund regardless, whether it's a general tax or a special tax. But if it's a special tax, it can only be used for that, a specific purpose,
Yeah,
legally.
But how do you still, is there some other mechanism to really steer it in the direction of
Yeah,
public
well,
safety?
there is.
I
So-
don't,
so,
I
yeah.
don't think I could just go for general.
Trust.
No, of
Huh?
course not.
Trust.
Well,
So
I
there-
trust us, but I don't know if anybody else does, you
Yeah,
know?
so there's, with a general tax legally has to be available for any city purpose. But you can put an advisory measure on the ballot along
okay.
with the tax measure, asking, if this general tax is approved, should the city spend this money on X?
Right, okay.
And that's
okay,
not
okay.
binding, but it gives some assurance.
So did we approve the questions that are going out? That you
Yes.
sent that? So that's finalized?
Yes.
And that's kind of heavily questioned towards a special tax in my mind,
Yeah,
towards
but we,
law enforcement.
but our office reviewed and made changes to it so that it's not obligated
Oh, so
for
the
that
version that
purpose.
we got
That-
is not the final one?
It is.
Oh,
Yeah, but it
that's the one I
doesn't,
thought.
yeah.
it says to help, to
The way
help
I read that
support
as a
the-
normal, regular old, taxpayer was this money would go towards public safety.
Well, that would be the intent, but it's just that legally you can't say that. You
Right.
can't, yeah. So,
Why legally can't we say that?
because Howard Jarvis would come in and challenge it and it would be overturned.
I don't understand what you would
if,
challenge.
if,
Why would
if
we
you
do
didn't
it?
get a two-thirds vote, because, if, yeah.
So we're
So-
looking at it as more of a voting convenience than anything else. I mean, because we don't want to have to go the full.
Right.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's really difficult to get a two-thirds vote.
But like I say, I would still really like to see whatever that advisory vote, the language in that, to head in that direction, because again, hey, we're not gonna be in this financial situation forever.
Right.
And the last thing we wanna do is cut,
Yeah,
including our, our police department.
Right.
And therefore their training, and then we're gonna be the exact same situation where we were in 10 years ago.
So-
Where you had officers with a lack of training getting hurt out there in the field.
yeah. So even if you don't put a separate advisory measure on the ballot, the city council can adopt a resolution saying that it's your intent to spend this tax,
Okay.
if it's approved, on this purpose. Yeah, and then there are other ways to just word the ballot measure itself to say, a general tax that would be used to, to maintain police staffing, et cetera, levels and other city purposes, or something, as long as it doesn't, as long as
I'd
there's
sure like to
some-
keep it in that
Right.
public safety direction versus other purposes too.
Right.
Well, in that wording, would we be able to give them a percentage of what percentage of the tax would go towards that? Or we just say, we're gonna put some of it towards it? Do we give them a number? Do we say we're gonna give you 90% of it, 80% of it, 20% of it, 5% of it? How do we deal
I
with
think that's
that?
where you work on the language,
Well, that's
at
my
that point,
question.
yeah.
My question is, what do we say? When people ask, well, how much of this money is gonna go towards the police department? Are we gonna say, well, some of it? Well, how much is some? Well, some of it. I think
Well,
we
no,
need to
well,
define it.
okay, but you can spend all of it on that. It's just that you can't be legally bound to do that.
Yeah, is it possible to have some example of verbiage of that advisory
Absolutely, yeah.
that advisory measure? Because, like I say, if it's gonna be too vague, I don't think even we're gonna support it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't seem targeted enough.
I have a question.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's, to that point, where in an economic downturn, this money would help buffer the fund and everything. But you guys can help me out, when the economy did take a dive and everything got really tight and everything, did we cut the police department at all? Anything in the, because people got cut, right?
Yeah.
Not officers.
We didn't cut officers, we did have some nutrition where somebody
What, you had what?
left,
Attrition.
attrition, where they
You
left.
said nutrition.
Yeah, where they left and then we didn't fill the positions.
Who was mainly cut in that downturn? Did we,
And, yeah, most of it was, we
nobody
did
was
lay off, our recreation director, we laid off our code enforcement
To
and
save
evidence
payroll.
clerk. We laid off our dispatch and moved our dispatch over to Alta Ripon.
Assistant city manager.
The assistant city manager.
but I'm just clarifying
Public
that
Works Director.
nothing in the public safety was
But
necessarily.
their wages were affected. So everybody took a wage cut.
Oh, okay.
But now you have a scenario where you have two more officers versus then as well. And I have no idea what the result of that's going to be.
Actually, you have more than you'd had prior to that.
And that's what I'm saying,
Because
so,
in 14 is when you started adding back officers.
Right.
Because you were, in 14, I think you were at 9,
Yeah.
8 or 9, and in 14, you made the decision to add a sergeant and another officer, and thus made the adjustments to go to 10 full-time. We're currently at 11, projected to go to 12 in January. So, yes, you were down to 8 or 9 officers as of 14. And so when the council decided to add back some of those positions that were gone to get to the staffing.
well, and that's what I'm saying, that's where it becomes a circus trying to get your training in, because, okay, you only have so many officers there, and so you're trying to get away their training their training times, and you can't do that, and then they're
Also,
going
you
unprepared.
you don't maintain, the cost of maintaining, which we saw in July, of trying to maintain 2 officers 24/7, it impacts your overtime budget as well. And, but the additional officers, we should be able, if we can ever get them hired, we should be able to eliminate some of that and free up the ability to to attend training without paying for overtime or having reserves covered.
I had another thing. So I don't know when it was, but I think it was during the same time where the city council said they want to have a reserve, right, of 33% of the general budget. Is that right? Something like that, of the operating budget? And that's what the public safety is paid out of.
Correct.
So, and now our reserve is, and we wanted to get that 33 for economic downturn purposes where we'd be able to fund it.
Correct.
And now we're at 44%.
Right around 40.
So fiscally, we're doing very well. We have a savings account. We have a rainy day account, right? So the sales tax measure is worded, and in my mind, it's sort of being marketed, and I get it, as build up a rainy day fund for public safety, is the way I'm looking at it. If something happens, we'll have funds available to handle the police department or make sure you're safe. But it seems like we already have those funds.
But those funds are not gonna they're not gonna be sustainable for year after year. So if you have an economic.
You mean in an economic downturn?
Right.
Right, nothing's gonna be worse than 08, 09. I mean, that's the worst one we're probably ever gonna see. And so, maybe not. And 1929, I know. And but anyways, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. Anyways, that's all I have.
Okay. Ann, anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to matters presented from the audience. At this time, the public may address the city council on any item that's not on the agenda but is within the authority of the council. And I'd like to see if we can keep things at 5 minutes as best we can. I would appreciate that if you can. Who would like to come up first?
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council, good to be with you. Russell Fowler, Assemblymember Heath Flores' office. Just wanted to say it was good to be at the Escalon Historical 30th year celebration. That was very fun and saw lots of good things, and that's a great museum, so everybody did a great job there. And then do have a little bit of bad news. Our bills that went up to the governor were vetoed, so we didn't get any this time, so we'll be back next session, and hopefully we'll do a little bit better.
I had a question about that. Which was the one, how many bills did Heath sponsored one, right? Or how many?
3, we had 3.
Which one, what were they again?
AB 550 was the Veterans in-home care services one,
Yeah, was
where.
there a different one? What was the other one?
What?
I'm trying to figure out the specific one I saw a
And
news story
then,
about. City of
AB
Manteca one, right?
Yeah, AB 1732, the RDA one with the nonprofit, homeless nonprofit.
What was the reasoning behind that?
Um,
That sounds crazy to veto that.
It was, the way the governor put it in his release was it added too much to the state budget, so.
But the nonprofit was gonna pay for it.
I'll put it this way, we were very disheartened, and we'll be back next year
Seemed like
supporting the same bill.
It seemed like one anybody would vote on. I don't know. That's crazy.
What you think would make sense in Sacramento
Maybe I
doesn't
don't
really
get
make
it
sense
either. Anyway.
down here, so. Might have to do with what letter's next to our name, but, who knows? But the other piece of news I have is that, and I don't want you to celebrate too hard, but this will be my last meeting. I'm leaving the office at the end of the month, so it's been a pleasure to be here in the community again. And,
Who said you could do that?
well, I wanted to devote my time to grow a goatee good as Councilmember Curmudgeon. So now hopefully I can do that, and then I'll really then I'll really start seeing some success. So it's been a pleasure to be in the community, and I know that you'll be covered because it's very important to the Assembly member. So best of luck, and you guys will do just great. So
I miss you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think I'm Facebook friends with all of you. So if you need something, don't be too far away, but you'll be well covered. And
Where are you going?
I don't know. I'll figure it out. Huh? Yeah, if you see me on the sidewalk, throw a couple pennies in for me, all right? just know that we were once upon a time, good friends. We looked out for each other.
Well, Russell, I hate to hear that news, but I'm going to tell you, you're like, I see you at every single community activity, There's no reason you can't keep going to all those community activities.
You know, my,
People are expecting you already. Hey, where's Russell at?
well, hey, the
Yeah.
$4 a gallon might give me a good reason not to come
Oh.
on. But, you know, other than that, I'd love to, but maybe I'll stop by for a few things here and there, so.
Okay.
But other than
Fair
that,
enough.
it's been great, and you guys have made me feel welcome, so.
Thank you
I
very
like to
much.
refer to myself as the adopted son, so.
Yes,
There you
you are.
go.
That time.
You are.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
All right, Russell,
Thank you,
take
Russell.
care.
Yeah, just real quick, I don't need 5 minutes. I'd like to say something about the sales tax initiative. As we saw tonight, we could possibly be spending general fund money on things the city wasn't interested in. So when I look at sales tax, and I am in favor of a specific tax to get 2 more officers. I think the city needs it. I think the rotation that goes in and out of here, and like you said, the training, I think it's infrastructure. But I'm really debating whether I would vote for it if it's not a specific tax. That's number one. Number two, if we're going to do this, let's learn a lesson from the school district. And let's get everybody out there, all your groups that you attend, and start selling it. You know, if you just say, we're going to put it on the ballot and let her fly, you know, you're going to get the people not really responding the way you want them to. So again, I would just suggest that you get out there to your groups and start selling it. And I strongly support the dedicated tax. I think your Survey Monkey gave you 70%. Don't know that that's necessarily accurate, but that was pretty high. So somebody's talking about it out there, and that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate it very much. Anybody else like to say their piece?
I would, but before I say anything, this has been bugging me all
I know. The names are swapped.
I don't pay attention, I know the names.
Your OCD kicked in.
Yeah.
Dave Willis, 425 Sultana Way. I'd like to talk about what went on item 9 on the last meeting, the variance that you granted. I'm not here to ask you to change the variance that you granted, but I was a little perturbed at how it went down. We'll start with Councilman Crumick, who should not have been in on this from the very first. And he was told ahead of time not to be in when this item came up. And when he did leave, when he stood up, he said, if I'll try to get it correctly, I can't vote on this, but if I could, I'd vote for it. I thought that was very inappropriate comment to make at that time. Maybe the city attorney will agree with me, I don't know, but it was definitely, in my opinion, the wrong thing to say when he said it. On to Councilman Alves. I have heard you say many times that you didn't like the way things were put up willy-nilly all over this city.
Willy-nilly is a good
Yeah, but then, you voted for something that could lead to willy-nilly.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Well, you may disagree with me, but I also understood you to direct the city staff to look into changing the ordinance where people might be able to put those carports or whatever without clearances.
If he did his if they did them like his, I would still agree with that, Dave.
Well, my point is, you look, I understood that, did they ask you to look into changing the ordinance to allow for these less clearances? I don't think that's appropriate. I think because maybe if you allow it to be done without a variance, then the neighbors will have no choice.
Well, I don't.
My time, Ed, my time.
Oh, excuse me, Dave. Take it all you want.
Yeah, I intend to, and I'm going to ask for a variance on my time too. But when somebody doesn't, next thing you know, there's something going up right at their fence line, and they've had no say in the matter. I think that's inappropriate. I don't think that's right. At least let it go through the procedure. Why burden the city staff with more work? You can leave the ordinance as it is and then have them come and ask you for a variance, which would to me seem the appropriate way to do it, other than to allow, because I'll tell you, Sunday I was riding my bike and I saw some things coming down First Street down at my end over there. I don't know if they even got permit to put them up. There is a carport that has no clearance between the house and the fence, and behind that there is a big shed that has no clearance from the fence. And I don't care what our fire department says, if something happens, you're gonna have trouble in some of these houses that are a little bit closer together than other houses. So, like I say, all I'm saying is please leave the ordinance as it is and have them come and ask for variances, other than just to allow variances, you know, to allow them to build, because maybe a neighbor will not, you know, says, hey, well, actually, the one on First Street partially blocks the view of the people if they're sitting on their front porch. It's sticking out to a point where, whoa, you know, they can't, you know, it's blocking their view. So, like I say, if you have asked the city to look into changing the ordinance, I'm gonna ask you, leave the ordinance as it is and have them come and ask for the variance. That way, the people in the neighborhood have the opportunity to say, hey, this is okay or this is not okay. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Dave, while you're there, don't leave yet. I wanna tell you something. A couple weeks ago, maybe months ago, we passed an ordinance in this town that we're allowing buildings to be built adjacent to other people's properties with no say at all. That was passed and mandated by the government. We have no choice in that. What's the difference between that and what we're talking about?
Well, these are homes, you're talking when
I'm talking about, we have a deal we passed.
Okay, you're talking about like mother-in-law houses in the back?
Correct, yes.
All right.
Dwelling unit.
They will not be parking motorhomes or boats loaded with gasoline or diesel fuel or propane tanks.
Oh, let's hope not.
All right? And they will probably be not next to gas meters.
And that's a possibility.
Yeah. See, these are the things you've got to look at. If you're gonna put up like a mother-in-law place, it's gonna be backing away, and they're gonna have to put in all kinds of electrical, plumbing, you know, water. It's gonna have to be put in.
But, you know, as far as the last gentleman we just gave the right to do it, the man had an immaculate home. He is a clean individual. I don't think we should penalize people like that, Dave. I just think that's too much government, Dave.
I'm not saying to
Way too
penalize.
much government.
I'm not saying, so the next person whose yard isn't as nice, you're not gonna allow it?
Well,
What? I mean, yeah.
if they come to us and ask permission, they're a pig pen, hell no.
Well, then that's,
It's like everything else, Dave. If they come to here and they don't do something correctly, why would we condone that? I condoned what I felt was right for this gentleman and his situation. Every situation is gonna be different.
that's why I would like it to come before the city council for the variance instead of just allowing it. Because maybe a neighbor doesn't want a 15-foot carport next to their side
Well, this
fence.
gentleman did have the neighbors condone.
I understand that, but maybe the next person won't.
Well, maybe that's something we'll consider.
That's why I would like you to leave the ordinance as it is, and all variances be on a one-on-one basis, just, hey.
And gentlemen, this has been a very good point, some very good points on both sides. And I know that Dominique, I know you're in the middle of constructing, you know, a possible change to that ordinance, and hopefully you're taking all this into consideration as well. It's a very good point, very good point.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak tonight? No? Okay. Okay, moving on to public hearing. Item number 7. Yes,
One more
yes.
thing. Excuse me.
Okay.
I asked for a
Almost
variance.
moving on.
I asked for a
I'll
variance.
just quick.
The recent Scottish games we had.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Why was all that parking along the fence on the road there, no parking allowed?
Safety.
What safety?
Safety. Well, it's the same reason why people have, why people would like to have that additional parking put into the orchard, so that kids aren't running for their lives, or people aren't running for their lives on Arthur Road.
Do you put no parking out for the soccer when it's out there?
No, we don't, Though, that may not be a bad idea.
Well, I was
Yeah.
just curious, I was just
Yeah.
curious about that.
Because you're right, ultimately, it is an acknowledgement that there is a, there is a danger, of, you know, an element of danger there, as well as parking on Lake Miller Avenue across the street. You know, same thing, you have that same potential element of danger there.
Yeah, because when I came rolling up, they had this area for parking, they wanted $10.
The youth, that was the youth, the ASB youth group, and then
No,
next door was a
they didn't
Covenant
say
youth group.
anything about it.
No, oh, they should have advertised
should have
it,
said.
yeah. Did they tell you that that's what it was for?
No, you just, the young lady come out and says $10 to park.
Yeah? Did you ask them what group they were in?
Hey, it's her job to tell me.
Good point, good point.
Dave, I got asked that. I got asked, why is the city charging $10 for parking there? Like, it has nothing to do with
Yeah.
the city, so yeah, so
It-
they
it-
were not clear.
It would have been a very nice idea, I think, for their benefit, to say who they were. You know, that was, yeah, the ASB kids, as a fundraiser for their, programs. It would have been a very good idea had they advertised that. Good point. Well, the church was right next to it for their youth groups. But in either case,
Right.
hey, if you're a charity, advertise that this is for a charity. You know, I'm not saying you'll get tipped or anything like that, but still, it takes a little bit of the sting off.
Yes.
You know, if you know that it's going to a cause like that. No, well, point well taken.
I didn't know if it was
Yeah.
somebody just decided to put up some fences,
Right.
temporary fences, and rip people off for $10 a pop.
No, good point, point well taken. I think they've taken that into consideration too.
Dave, you're just jealous because you didn't think of it.
Dominique,
You're jealous because you didn't think of it.
Well, hey, yeah.
A man in retirement like you?
Dominique, let's move on to your item, which is item number 7, which is, go for it, please.
This is adopting a resolution approving the 2020 SJMSCP development fees as adjusted pursuant to the financial analysis model for the San Joaquin Council of Governments. This is an annual item that gets adjusted every year by the council. Back in 2001, the city agreed to participate jointly and collectively with San Joaquin County and its incorporated cities to extend the neighboring land protection program in perpetuity by adopting the San Joaquin County Multi-Species Habitat Conservation and Open Space Plan. The key purpose of that plan is to provide a strategy for balancing the need to conserve open space and the need to convert open space to non-open space uses while protecting the region's agricultural economy, to preserve landowner property rights, to provide for the long-term management of plant, fish, and wildlife species, especially those that are currently listed or may be listed in the future under the Federal Endangered Species Act or the California Endangered Species Act, to provide and maintain multiple-use open space which contribute to the quality of life of the residents in San Joaquin County, and to accommodate a growing population while minimizing costs to project proponents and society at large. Along in that plan, we've adopted a 5-year financial analysis that we review and then adjust it annually. The fees are listed in here. There's also a table which shows the history and annual percentage of change for the development fees. The projects that wish to participate under this benefit from a predetermined streamlined processing of the project rather than navigating through a potentially very long and cumbersome regulatory process outside the habitat plan. By opting for participation, the projects can choose a number of ways to provide mitigation for the impacts of the project through the plan and even control much of the mitigation costs if desired. The options are to either pay a fee, redesign the project to avoid or minimize impacts, provide land in lieu of the fee, which the project will negotiate the easement and fee title costs, which is a Category A component, or any combination of those options. Or the project proponent can choose to not participate in the plan and fulfill mitigation requirements on their own with state and federal permitting agencies independently. So this plan is a benefit, and that is why the city chose at that time to be involved with it and be a member. It does provide assistance and a quicker, more efficient way of getting through those processes. We do have Laurel Boyd here with SJCOG to answer any questions specific to the fees. She's much more hands-on in that area than I am. And if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to help. our
Very,
answer.
very good. Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, and I'll be opening it up in just a moment. Are there any initial questions or thoughts from the council before I open it up?
I'd like to ask the lady, step two, please.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get right into the public hearing then, if you don't mind. And let's commence the public hearing now. And Lauren, please, if you don't mind.
Laurel.
Laurel?
Yes.
Laurel, sorry about that, Laurel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Laura, could you explain to me the process in which takes place on an annual basis that gets us to where we are now?
We have a 5-year fee analysis model. We're in the last year of our model right now, so Steve Mayo and I will be going through a huge process probably in February or March. Every year it gets adjusted. We pull, our main driver is the agricultural land sales within the county. And we hit a peak in, I believe, 2018 or 2017, 2018, when our fees were at their highest, and now they're starting to drop.
You saying they're not gonna go up?
I can't predetermine that because they're ag land sales within the county.
But during your process, because if the land is not selling at a higher rate, your rates will stagnate or possibly go back down.
Right, right,
Interesting.
yeah.
I didn't know that was ever possible.
Yeah.
Taxes going
I
down.
think the last couple of years,
Done
a
it
couple of the
here. Done it
categories have
here.
gone down.
Yeah, yeah, we're starting to see
Big
it
time
return to
also.
normal.
Yeah, last year was like 30%.
It's not fun to tell people how much they have to pay, so.
Yeah, it never is.
Did
All right,
that,
well, that answers my.
did that answer your
Yes,
question?
it did. Thank you
Okay.
very much. That was perfect.
You're welcome.
Is there any additional questions from the council?
I just want everybody to understand how this works.
Are there any additional questions or input? This is a public hearing. It's been opened up. Any questions from the audience? No? Okay.
This process is also supported by BIA, right?
Yes.
This is
They are on our fee subcommittee as well, John Beckman.
it's a good opportunity to buy out.
The other option would be to go through both the state and the Fed, and that's never fun. It's very time consuming,
It's a good program.
streamlines it.
Very good. If there are no further questions, then we'll close the public hearing. We'll bring it back to council. And Dominic, what would you need from us tonight regarding,
I just need council to adopt that resolution that approves the development fees as
Okay.
adjusted, and then they'll pass it on to their groups to move forward with that change.
okay, so this is an actionable item?
Yes,
So
adopting of
therefore,
that resolution.
whenever you are prepared, I would need a motion.
I move to adopt the resolution. I don't know how to say it.
Adopting the 2020 SJM.
I move to adopt the resolution, SJMSCP, development fees and adjusted pursuant financial analysis
Okay,
stuff.
very good. Motion's been made,
Second.
and motion's been made and seconded to adopt the resolution approving the 2020 SJMSCP development fees as adjusted pursuant to the financial analysis model from Sound King Council of Governments. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And on to council communications. Councilmember Crumick.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. Yeah, I'd just like to say, in response to Mr. Willis's comments, that I hold Mr. Willis in very high regard. I think he's a model citizen for the town. He's a heck of a nice guy. And I had no intention of offending anybody with my comments as I was walking out. But in hindsight, that was a sort of a disrespectful thing I shouldn't have done, and probably shouldn't have done it in terms of being following the rules. So I apologize for that. And also to that point, I agree with you that we shouldn't change the ordinance. I was in favor of granting the variance, which in my opinion is when somebody comes in, they goes, listen, I want you to make an exception for me because I'm worthy of it. And I thought that this gentleman was, and I think that so that's it. I do think, and it's weird, it's not just a line in the sand, but it's one that we can skirt a little bit depending on the situation. So I would just like to clarify that. I thought he was a great candidate for a variance. Not all of them are, and we don't approve all of them. So I'd just like to make that comment. I have a few more things here. There is a program that Ripon adopted called Safer Routes to School. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but they got like $400,000 through a grant, and it's used to, the city takes those funds and it encourages walking and biking to school. And it creates safer paths, like bike, crossing things. I thought that might be something to look into, since it's a neighboring community and they got a grant. The program is actually called Safer Routes to School.
Yeah, that funding comes through our SJ-COG. So
Okay.
it's a matter of having.
It's not a grant, or it is a grant from SJ-COG?
You submit your projects, the projects are, scored, sorry. They're scored, and then the funding is dispersed in that fashion. We have submitted a couple of projects in the past.
Yeah, last year we applied for 2 grants, but we weren't funded. We do anticipate to apply.
Do they give reasons why they don't fund you?
I asked, and they gave me the scoring.
The scoring matrix, and
Yeah,
that's
which
it,
didn't really
yeah.
tell me
Because it's
anything,
interesting that
so-
Ripon is, they probably have a higher medium housing income than us, and yet they got money. So I'm wondering, we would be a good community for that. I mean, a lot of close,
So last
Basically-
year, we focused more on like bike and trail projects. I think in this next route for Safer Routes to School, we're going to be focusing
Oh, you're familiar
more
with
on,
it?
yeah, curb, gutter, sidewalk projects, especially around the schools, because there are areas.
Oh.
And because they're near the schools, they get the higher qualification, because you have more people in the vicinity,
Okay.
more cars traveled, more people walking the streets. And so we've been looking at areas in town, trying to pick 1 or 2 projects that we would move forward on. So that's what we're hoping to do this
Yeah.
next round.
So mostly they're looking at the curb, the sidewalk, the pathways,
Crosswalks.
or bike paths.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Pedestrian and sidewalk improvements.
And really,
yeah.
the way COG looks at it is they look at the quality of the project and the limited amount of money they have, and they disperse it based upon the quality of the project.
Okay, so it's up to
Benefit-
us to
the
put something
benefit
together.
to
Yeah.
a community in general, not necessarily specific.
So when you submit
communities.
a project, do you like put a package together and
We do.
send
Yeah,
it?
we put 2 pretty large packages together
Okay.
last year.
But no, we didn't get,
We didn't get funded on either of them. If I had to guess or speculate when I was looking at other cities, we were actually, even though we didn't get funded, we were higher. We scored better than everybody else that also didn't get funded. And so I'm just thinking that as far as a benefit, not enough people would be utilizing that. We have to do, average daily counts of cars and stuff. And so for the projects we were looking at, I don't think it had enough people on the street or people utilizing it now to where it benefited putting it in. And so I think that,
Okay,
purely speculating from what I could see, I think that's why we didn't get funded.
okay, thank you.
So.
I had the dinosaur park, a slide is out. How do we get replacement slides? Is that something Justin handles?
Yes.
Is
So
that a
it-
long process, or can't you just buy a new slide and throw it up?
depends. It depends upon the equipment and whether it's available or not. I know our playground equipment over in Brentwood, we were not able to get a replacement slide
Is that
for
slide
it.
still down?
Yes, we can't get the replacement slide for it.
It's just, that's it.
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to replace that
okay.
unless you replace all of the equipment.
Can we look into the dinosaur park one?
Yeah,
I mean, I go there
yeah.
a lot, and my neighbor asked about it, and so, I don't know. Okay, thank you. Just a couple more things. Okay, so there's something going on right now, I think it's kind of a big deal with the PG&E versus SSJID. It came up at the LAFCO meeting, and basically what it comes down to, in my mind, is SSJID is able to take over this area and provide electricity. And they can do it for a cheaper rate than PG&E. Is kind of where the discussion is happening. And PG&E, going through their bankruptcy, going through their kind of scandals and different things and their blackouts, I think this is something long-term for the town. Now, because PG&E, like a lot of utility companies, they're kind of legal monopolies. They take over an area and they do whatever they do. And this is an opportunity where we have some competition. And I'm really in favor of supporting SSJID in this endeavor. Right now, PG&E, they're going through the courts because PG&E doesn't want it to happen. But I think that this is something that us as a city council, hopefully the cities of Ripon, Manteca would get behind it too, because we're talking a lot of savings for the community. If they're gonna give us 15% lower rates, and if PG&E is gonna charge 15% more to cover their bankruptcy, I think we're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars for people. And I think it's something that we should start talking about.
So we have in the past, we've supported, and even most recently, they had went to the governor, all the mayors had signed a letter, this city, Manteca.
In support of
Ripon
SSJID?
had all supported it,
Oh.
yes, yeah,
When was that sent? Do you remember?
The spring?
yeah,
This spring?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, I mean, the
I know.
city,
Yeah.
the city has passed resolutions supporting them in the past, because it's been going on for several years.
Oh,
So
okay.
there has been, we have.
There's lots of support. Everybody wants SSJID,
Oh, yeah.
but it's PG&E is just gumming it up with keeping it in the courts and, okay.
Correct.
I just
Yes.
didn't know if everybody was on the same page. I thought that was interesting. Okay, my last thing might be a little touchy of the subject. So the city of Ripon has one city council meeting a month. They start at 6 o'clock, and I personally would like to do one meeting a month and start at 6 and go and knock it all out, even if it took twice as long, rather than have two meetings. If the city of Ripon, who's over the size, way over the size of, well, I know it's late, but some meetings aren't. And I think that that's something that I would like to look at and get the council's feedback on. If we could, I mean, the city of Ripon can do it on one meeting. I think we should be able to do it on one meeting a month. What do you guys think?
It's always been a double-edged sword, because I think the one thing that you who've been going to hear, and you watching up there on YouTube land, will know that there's always a lot of dialogue between the council and the public, and I think that really contributes to the transparency. Now, I don't know if Ripon, if they literally cut people off, as you know, for example, mayor's presented of the audience, be great to keep everything to 5 minutes. Sometimes that just doesn't happen, okay? So you lean in favor of that extra minute or two versus cutting everybody off. And again, I'm not being familiar with how Ripon handles its meetings. I don't know if they just don't have as much to discuss, or if they just go with, well, we're gonna be here till 10, 11 o'clock at night. My hesitation, I'm a morning person. I'm not an evening person, as it is. So.
I do know that they will hold
No,
special
I
meetings
prefer,
too.
I prefer the way it is, because like I say, I just don't want to be running the risk, and sometimes there will be an awful lot of stuff on the agenda, and as I think several of us who've been in this position before know that there are some meetings, especially if you skip a meeting, the following meeting, there is a lot of stuff to do, and you're doing everything you can to try to keep that meeting to within 3-4 hours. And sometimes you're lucky if you can do it, but if there's some hot button issues, again, you're almost always err towards the side of transparency, input, and that can really draw an evening out. So, I mean, I would prefer to keep it the way it is.
How would we change that if we wanted to?
It's actually set by an ordinance. It's in our municipal code.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Fair enough.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Crumick. Councilmember Legero.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. Couple comments here. We're now having to deal with issues that we weren't able to deal with a few years back because the economy is good and we've got money. One example is being able to hire 2 officers. That wasn't something that we were able to do. The recession hit us hard and hit us for a long time. So now we're in a position that we can start to take advantage of the revenues that we do have and try and start rebuilding some of the city services that have been able to do a lot of heavy lifting with few resources for a long time. So I think that's a good spot to be in. It does create issues. The example of the skate park, that issue has only come up recently because we had $400,000 in the Parks and Rec Fund. So we had money in there. So once that money was available, now we have to look at what are we going to use it for. So as soon as the issue of the skate park came up, there were other projects that were brought to the council, and those have been addressed. So this isn't a problem that we would have had a few years ago, but we have it now, and it's not a bad problem to have, but it does create the conversation that we need to have. So I am appreciative that we are having the conversation about improving the public facilities, the park and rec space, and trying to come up with a decision on how we are gonna spend that money, if we're gonna spend that money. So I think the fencing at the community center, I think that was Mayor Pro Tem Al's issue and stuff, that's being addressed. So it's a good spot to be in, and it's a good dialogue to have. I appreciate the fact that we're gonna sit down with the Parks Foundation and try and hammer out some terms so that everybody knows what their expectations are and what their responsibilities are. I know Gracie has been at it since the foundation, since Henry created the foundation. So when Henry set this up, the idea was that we didn't have the staffing to do a lot of this work. We didn't have the staffing or the money to do it. So you create a foundation, the foundation can go out there and attempt to fund some of these projects. So I'm appreciative of the work that the foundation has done and continues to do. I think there is support, continuing support. You see it with the dollars that are donated to the Parks Foundation for this specific project. So, and since I've been on the council, I've been requested to continue to push to see this project get funded and get finished. I continue to have constituents that are constantly asking me, when is it going to be built? So it's definitely a project, at least the people that I'm talking to are in support of. How it's funded, that's a different issue. If it needs to be a budget item and it needs to go through the budget process, I have no problem with that. We have money that could be dedicated to that, but it can be dedicated to other projects. But the fact that we're having the conversation and we are moving forward on some of these projects, I think is critical. It's also important to remember that there are a handful of projects that are viable. Specifically when we start talking about the community center and the park space available out there, the lease that we are involved with, and the projects that are available and can be funded and actually finished and delivered. So we don't want to look into projects that we can't fund, we can't finish, we can't deliver. So as we move forward, as we start talking about a new budget, that's a conversation I think is important to have, and I appreciate the input, and that's the direction that we need to go. Then I would like to see that as part of the discussion and when we start talking about budgets. But other than that, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Legero. Councilmember Merkin.
I got several comments on Facebook the other day directed towards speeding problems in Escalon again. They identified about 3 different places. One of them is right out here, and Escalon Avenue and Santa Fe. Traffic coming in from Riverbank. They don't slow down until they hit the curve, so.
We've been enforcing Escalon Avenue since I've read those same comments, directed resources there. Officer Quillisi, for one, spent an hour out there, made at least 5 stops, issued 2 cites, 3 warnings. Other officers have been spending their time. We're tracking where they're spending time. Again, as you well are aware, it all depends because we don't have a dedicated traffic officers. They work that when they're not handling calls for service. This morning, a traffic stop resulted in an arrest, tied up the officers, so they're not dealing with traffic enforcement, they're processing prisoners, so.
Yeah. As long as we're making an effort at it, that's all we ask. And my last comment is, goes along with what Russell said earlier, the Historical Society open house. If you didn't go to that, you missed something, because that was a gas. I saw people there that I hadn't seen in years. Two school teachers, my favorite school teachers were there, Elizabeth Blixt and my history teacher, Art Sanguinetti. They were both there, and they both remembered me, so I must have made an impression somewhere along the line. I don't know whether it was good or bad, but that was fun because I was a youngster there. Everybody there was old Escalon people. I mean, they remember when Escalon was really small, and it's fun to talk to them because they have such vivid memories of, you know, what used to be on Main Street, you know, the stores that we had and the people that were active in the community. And it was fun to talk to them, so if you ever get a chance to go to one of those again, go. And that's all I got.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Merkin. Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Well, I wish I would've made it, but I was busy, but I know it must have been a blast. Sanguinetti, who was your other teacher?
Blixt, Mrs. Blixt.
What did she teach?
She taught, she was at Dent. She was my 6th grade teacher.
Oh, God, that's amazing.
She remembered me stapling the tennis shoes to the wall.
Anyway, a while back, we were discussing hiring a consultant to give us an idea of what to do with some of our facilities. And one of the questions I have, and we talked about the library and it needing air conditioning, I would like to recommend maybe Justin go out and get some AC guys and have them go and look at it and give him an idea what he's dealing with. I mean, what's
So-
wrong with that?
We have did that,
And
and, I mean, we're talking $40,000 to $60,000 that we're getting quotes on for the library.
well, it's not gonna change by hiring a consultant, I'll tell you that. It's just
Well,
gonna
it's
be-
not, no, but I mean, at the last meeting, the council approved putting out the RFP, to look at all of that, and so it's actually scheduled to go out tomorrow.
That's just crazy. I think sometimes we should try to do more internal stuff. Stuff like that, I think we could handle ourselves. Consultant's is like a contractor, and we don't really need a contractor. We have a public works guy who's well capable of soliciting bids and information regarding, air conditioning rework on a building. It's not that complicated. The other thing is, the trailer park out here, or the park out here, has got the new rock in there, looks great. I wanna thank Public Works for doing a great job. Thanks staff. Did you guys get the sign taken care of for him, the guy that brought the rock?
Yeah, it's been up since before we even got the first load.
Thank you very
And
much.
we had the RVs that were on the south side of the property moved to the middle so we could restripe at angles.
Excellent,
so-
excellent.
They'll be, allowed to move back in the middle of this week.
Sure,
And then we'll stripe the center.
that's excellent, and it looks good too. And Public Works did a nice job with the ramps. I was questioning whether or not they'd last. They looked great, and they held up. The games, the Scottish Games, I walked over there, it was perfectly laid out. It looked great. I watched some of the events. It was excellent. The only thing they lacked was some of the people to show up and watch it. And it's sad, because that was really a nice event. I think the Lions Club included everybody there, did a great job. I'd make some suggestions. One of them is I'd put the food court in one area, all in one area. I wouldn't have it spread out, nor would I spread the beer booths away with a fence in front of them. So with those two exceptions, everything else was excellent. I think it's a darn shame, I don't know why the word didn't get out better than it did, because it really was a neat event. Next question I had to ask, when people get solar on their houses, they get a permit for that solar. Now, the value of that solar remodel is assessed to their house as a home improvement?
At this time, I don't believe our county asks for copies of those permits at this time for residential. So they don't take them into consideration on the
So
improvements.
if you get solar in your house, there's not an assessment on your house, reassessment. So when they come around and reassess your property and they see those on there, they're not gonna say that's an improvement?
Yeah, we just talked about this a few weeks ago, and I can double check, but I remember being surprised that
I'm
they
shocked.
don't ask for copies of the permits related to solar for residential.
What I would like is that.
But I'll double check.
I'd like confirmation from the county that they're not gonna
Okay.
tax people for putting solar on their houses.
And it's different in all counties, they kind of all pick different
Let's work with
things
San
to
Joaquin.
tax.
since
Yeah,
that's
no,
where
no,
we're
I'm
at.
just saying that, so some do and some don't, but I will double check, but I do remember being surprised when
Okay,
we
that's good
talked
news.
about
I'd
that.
like to believe that, so I'd like it verified. How's our guy downtown doing?
So he's in process of putting sidewalks in, so his civil improvements
Is he
moving
doing it a
forward.
pebble at a time?
Couple of squares.
It
I
is,
cannot believe it. I go by that place, those 2x4s, look, they're growing in the ground now.
There's sidewalks there now.
Are there?
they are
finally?
poured, okay.
Yeah, on
So
Friday.
I
Sidewalks are
couldn't take
poured.
it no more. Okay, anyway.
So with the sidewalks being poured, he should be able to bond for the remainder of the project and then move forward. So we
We'll
should
get our
be getting,
50,000 finally.
when he pulls his permits.
What do you think that'll be this century?
I'm hoping so.
Great.
I'd like to see it
Okay.
pick up.
Okay, good enough. Last thing is, you know, we're talking about taxes and funding sources and mechanisms, which are all good things, we need them. I wanna start talking about ways we can make money or spend less money, because we never talk about those things. We only talk about raising taxes and getting more money from something for something else. We never talk about where we could maybe become more efficient somewhere and save some money, or we never talk about maybe we could cut something. I think those are things I'd like to adventure once in a while, so maybe during the course of a day, staff could once in a while think about stuff like that. So when we have a presentation that we're always asking for something, maybe once we could say to the people of Escalon, hey, we came up with something, we're gonna save you some money. Because I always get that feedback. You guys always ask, not you personally, they're telling me, you're always asking, but what are you ever giving? And we don't. And I think it's something we need to consider. I know we give good service, I know we have a great police department, and all those things are true. But put yourself in the perspective of the other people out there looking in. Because we don't, and we never bring it up here ever. Because it's always, we're gonna do this, get more money, and not to get more money. That's all, we need it. I get how it works. But we need to be able to go back to them once in a while and say, hey, look, and by the way, we did something to save you some money. So something to think about. And that's all I got to say, and thanks for indulging. Oh, one last thing, David, we can agree and disagree, but I still think you're a good man. All right.
Can I echo what he said really quick? Just want to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Alves said about cost savings. I mean, as a small business person, every year we're looking at what's our internet cost, what's our phones, what's this, how can I save here? Maybe if I switch a service provider, I mean, it could be anything, but I agree if there's a way to look at who's providing internet to the city, this building, you know, is there ways to make things more efficient, save some money? I mean, it adds up and it just shows good faith that the city is not doing everything that, yeah. So anyways, echo that, thanks.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks. Actually, another question regarding the sidewalks there on Coley now. Does that mean that he will be moving those fences back, at least for a while, so we'll be able to park on that side of the street to go to the post office? Tell him that'll be very, very preferred.
They'll be, if I remember correctly, before he put the sidewalks in, he had them out in the actual curb
Yes, you did.
gutter.
Yes, you did.
And he moved them back out into the street to address the sidewalk. We can ask him to pull them closer up, but I'm thinking he'll put them back where they were before, which would be along the gutter area of the sidewalk.
If he can put them up
But
for
if
a
he can
while, I
put them
think
up
it'd be a
more.
great move from a PR standpoint.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and we can see whether or not, now that there's sidewalk, I mean, we want, if there's sidewalk there, for it to be
Mhm.
cleared.
It'd be really wise
Yeah,
if
so
they
we
could
can-
do
we'll
that.
talk to 'em
you
about
know,
that.
From a community standpoint, I think. And speaking of community standpoints, yeah, I want to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Alves said regarding the Scottish Games. You know, they did a lot of things right. Yeah, they did a lot of things wrong. This was a first-year event. I know the city and the police department, Public Works bent over backwards making it happen. You know, if we can get more events like that, if we can get Escalon on the map for some of these other events, that would be a very good thing. That's typically a regional event. In other words, ideally, you see people from Modesto, Manteca, Ripon, Oakdale, you know, in this case. You know, like the Celtic Games in Sonora, you'll see people from all over there. And so that's really what you try to target with those. So, but that's okay. It's a first-year event. I had one of the musical acts tell me, you know, they've played at many first-year events over the years, and this was actually the most well-organized first-year event they've ever played at. So, and I will also tell you, the athletes, they love that field. They set a lot of new records on that field. So, like I say, you know, that group, they've got something to start with, and we'll see where they can take it from there. Also, I'd like to echo what Councilmember Merkin said regarding the 30th anniversary. Tammy, I want to thank you again for providing a proclamation to, for me to be able to read there. It was a great event. Unfortunately, I think I started looking at Sanguinetti, and I was back in class with his orals, and I think, Jeff, you can probably relate to that, you know, and so all of a sudden, like, it's flashback. So anyway, but it was a great event, and again, that's another great example of the soul of Escalon, so it was very nice to be there that night. Having said that, this will be at the end of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and I will declare this meeting adjourned.